Let's talk a little bit about paragraph structure in these essays that you're going to be writing. I here have set up an outline for a paragraph about logos. And what you really need to pay attention to here is the way that I identify not just how he's making claims, but also the evidence that supports my argument here. And I am looking at the last page of the book. It's sometimes a good idea when you're talking about logos to choose a passage from somewhere near the end of the book because the beginning is sort of setting up the terms of the argument, but the ending is kind of answering the questions of those arguments. So a lot of times where the author ends up is ultimately what their overarching argument is. So again, I'm looking at this question of why people need religion in South Africa, according to Trevor Noah, of course, and what he thinks about his mom's Christianity. And I've just kind of broken down here how he has developed the argument on the last page. So the first thing he does is he develops a causal claim. And again, remember, I want you to think about which kind of claim he is using in the passage that you decide to analyze. So he first develops this causal claim, and he says, like, basically, he's kind of accepting of his mom's version of events when Abel is pointing the gun at her head and he fires and it misfires. She looked up and looked at him straight down the barrel of the gun. Then she started to pray, and that's when the gun misfired. So you'll notice here that the language is extremely straightforward. There isn't like a lot of like complex sentences here. It's just this happened, this happened, this happened. And it's not necessarily saying that this happened because something else happened. So it's not saying she started to pray or the gun misfired because she started to pray. It just sets up the series of events and then it implies a causal argument that one thing caused the other. If you've ever taken a statistics class or heard about logical fallacies, you might know that correlation does not necessarily mean causation. There's a logical fallacy, which basically means like faulty logic that is bad, that says that just because two things happen together does not mean that one caused another. But here it's pretty clear that he's like hinting that potentially you could see it as causation. And then my next part of the argument is that he establishes that there's no logical explanation for why the gun misfired when it did. So again, I need to find the evidence that he actually does that. He has a whole paragraph about how nobody can explain why the gun misfired right when she started praying. So it does kind of seem then like a mystery, like a miracle even. But then you'll read through he has some jokes about the hospital bill and the insurance that she has. She says her insurance is Jesus. And then it says how he can't help but tell a joke in this moment, and it's like his kind of way of being cynical in the moment. And he even is very clear that he doesn't necessarily think that this was the right choice, because he says he couldn't resist teasing her with one last little jab. So it's not mean-spirited, but he does recognize kind of him being like a little bit of a smart aleck in that moment. And he says, but where was your Jesus to pay your hospital bill? And like the argument there, it's not just about how, hey, I was the one who paid your hospital bill. How about praying to me instead of to Jesus? He's not necessarily saying that. I think what he's saying is that, like, if we extrapolate that a bit and have a broader argument, that maybe the love between a mother and a son, particularly in this section, the love that a son has for his mother, could take the place of religion. It does seem to be that Trevor, with all of his skepticism about religion, has kind of suggested that instead of believing in a God, he believes in his mother. So there's an argument there that it's like, hey, you have your beliefs, I have mine. My beliefs are that love, this connection between you and me, can be as powerful of a coping mechanism as religion can be for you. This is what I have to cling to in a system that disenfranchises me. And then it says, but then she kind of turns it back around and says she here I say he returns to the old cause and effect logic, but it's clear that she's kind of manipulating her thinking. Like I say, this human calculation, like it's supposed to be funny that then she responds, but he blessed me with a son who did. It's funny and heartwarming at the same time, because throughout the book we have seen how she is like manipulated logic to fit her own point of view. And here she does that again, but it is with the express purpose of basically saying like, you are a blessing to me, which is like a beautiful sentiment, right? So if I were to write this paragraph, then I am going to explain piece by piece how he sets up this argument in this passage. And I'm going to do that using evidence from the text itself. And if I were being really careful, I would include MLA citations. If you don't know how to do those yet, then don't stress about it. 283, 284, 285. My book stops numbering them at some point, so I would do it like that within the paragraph. But basically, I'm just going to explain the way that this logic works here and how, in the end, he comes to the conclusion that religion can be a powerful coping mechanism, and kind of return back to my thesis statement.